All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Youth Ministry Network's third Tuesday conversation. I'm Danica Montplaisir, and I'd like to invite you all to a cup of coffee over this great conversation. For those of you who listen in regularly, you kind of know the drill, and I'd like to send a special welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time. 3TC is an informal monthly network gathering that is geared to be just that. We hope that you've grabbed yourself a cup of coffee and you're settled in wherever you are to chat with us today about current ministry topics. I do hope that you were able to join us for the special edition with Heidi Hagstrom last month talking about the gathering, but if you didn't get the chance, I want to make sure that you know that all the previous 3TC meetings are archived on our webpage, so you can go back to those at any time. I just want to make sure that we get our correct slide up here, so bear with me. Anyway, in order to make this an interactive conversation and a conversation over coffee, I want to make sure that you remember to type your question in to the box on the right-hand side of your screen, and then that'll give me the opportunity to pass your question along to our guest today, who's Karen Stevensen. I'd like to welcome you, Karen, to our network gathering. We're really glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
We've invited Karen here to talk about sex and sexuality, and specifically how church professionals talk with kids and families about this pertinent topic in our churches today. But before we get talking about that, I'm wondering, Karen, if you could share with us a little bit about yourself, your family, what keeps you busy when you aren't talking to people about sex and sexuality,
Okay.
and whatever else you'd like to share with us.
Hi, Danica. I'm a therapist in private practice for most of the time. So I see individuals for counseling and do a lot of marriage counseling. I also do some prevention work for the synods. I live in St. Paul, and so I do some prevention for Minneapolis and St. Paul synods in the area of safeguarding God's children, which is like to prevent kids from being sexually abused. And I do some boundaries workshops for youth workers, clergy, different people who are employed by the church. And I do pre-marriage workshops for about 35 churches here in the St. Paul, Minneapolis area. I do a day-long workshop giving couples tools for marriage, and that was kind of based on working with married couples over the years. I took kind of the information that I learned from working with them about what goes wrong and turned it around into a preventative workshop. So that's kind of the basics of what I do for work.
Great.
In terms of like family, I have a husband, Grant Stevenson, and I have 5 kids. They're all boys, age 17 through 29.
Awesome. Very cool. And any factoid you want to tell us about yourself, what you'll enjoy doing when you're not hanging out with all the men in your family?
Well, my husband and I have a big Harley Davidson, and we like riding motorcycle in free time. We like scuba diving, which gets us down into the Caribbean. We love just being with friends, hanging out. So we're just kind of relaxed people.
That's awesome. Thanks. That helps. You know, it's always fun to get to know who we are chatting with. So I appreciate you giving a little window into who you are. I didn't know you were a Harley chick, so that's awesome. Well, we have crossed paths in multiple ways. I first met you at Luther when you were teaching a class, or helping teach a class about marriage and family. And I was really intrigued by your intimacy wheel as sort of a way to enter into a sex and sexuality conversation with people, not only youth and families, but, you know, like you said, married couples and things like that. And I'm wondering if maybe for our purposes today, if you'd be able to unpack the intimacy wheel that's up on the screen as
Sure.
a window into talking about sex and sexuality with kids.
That'd be great. So this is about 20 years ago. I started to When churches or people ask me to talk about sex or relationships, I started to define sex within the context of intimacy. And intimacy to me means feeling close to someone or connected. But there's different types of intimacy. Like, for example, there's intellectual intimacy, which would be when you share with somebody and talk about your values, your goals, your experiences in your lifetime, and your vision for your life ahead, and you share all those kinds of things, you can feel really close and connected to that person, even though you haven't in any way been sexual with them. You still have a sense of feeling like you were listened to, and like you find places of commonality where you agree and your stories kind of cross in a way that's affirming. So that would be like intellectual intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
There's also physical intimacy, which I differentiate from sexual intimacy. Physical intimacy is how I take care of myself physically, like do I exercise and eat well and have good boundaries to make sure I myself am in good shape physically, emotionally, mentally. But also in that category I would put affection that's non-sexual, so that we all need touch, like the way God created us. In order to live, we need touch, and that's for all ages, from infants to elderly people. In fact, that's one of the hard things for elderly people, is sometimes after their partner dies, they have lost a great deal of touch, and that was a connection that was important in their life. There's social intimacy, and when I'm talking to teenagers about dating and relationships, I describe social intimacy as a place where you can pick up a lot of information. So, like, for example, if I go out bowling with somebody, I watch how they act towards the person they rent shoes from, how they act when they're winning, how they act when they're losing, how they act when I'm winning, and how they act when I'm losing, how they treat people of their same gender and how they treat other people of the opposite gender. It's a place when I go do something with someone where I can learn a lot about who that person is by watching their actions. And one of the things that's interesting about dating is to go home and get away from that person and then think through, what did I see about who this person is from how they act in the world. And that gives you a lot of information about whether this person fits with you or not, like if their values are similar or not. And in a good relationship, social intimacy is also kind of the energy of a relationship. When you go do things together, you have like a shared history with each other. And those experiences then play together, add a lot of fun to, and the energy and the, I just call it energy to the relationship. There's also sexual intimacy, and when I talk to young people about that, I say there's 4 reasons why God gave us this gift of sexuality, and I define them as, the first one is the promise to Abram and Sarah that they'll be a great nation. Kind of the procreation is one of the reasons God gave this gift to us. The second, though, is pleasure. That God knew that this part of this aspect of our relationship would bring a lot of pleasure when it's in a context of somebody you feel safe with and connected to. The third reason I think we got this gift is so that we can have companionship, deep companionship of knowing each other and being with each other in a way that's different than we are with other people. We can be more vulnerable and take more risks with somebody. And then the fourth reason is, in sexuality, we become co-creators. We create life like God does. And we bring forth life, and God charges us, like in the marriage relationship, with being good stewards over all the rest of creation. Like God says to married couples, I want you to take good care of your offspring, but also the earth itself and all the animals, and to be a part of creating the commonwealth that God has in mind for us. There's spiritual intimacy, And that one is really interesting. That's one of the harder ones to talk about. You'd think sex is
Hmm.
hard to talk about, but a lot of times when I work with couples, they find it really hard to talk about spiritual things. Like, so for example, one of the things I would say is when you have music move you to the point where you have goosebumps,
Hmm.
do you share it with the person you're close to? And open up about what was it in that music that touched you so deeply. And a lot of times people have that experience of hearing something, or like say being out in the boundary waters canoeing, and the stillness and being a part of nature, but they don't open up about what that means for them and how special that feels. So spiritual intimacy is also an important aspect. And then there's emotional intimacy. And I describe that as taking a risk, like being vulnerable with someone,
Hmm.
where you're asking yourself to be kind of truthful, but it also takes courage because you're opening up your heart in a way that the other person, if they reject you, it will hurt a great deal. So when I talk to kids about this intimacy and sexuality, I try and explain that I think of creating a healthy relationship as from the center of each of those wedges in the picture,
Hmm.
moving out in getting to know each other in each of those areas at approximately the same rate. Like meaning on TV, if I watch some TV shows, you'll see a couple go out and then go home and make love to each other. So they've gone all the way out in one area where they've been sexually as intimate as you can be, but they don't have any base of knowing each other
Hmm.
and each other's values, and they haven't had the opportunity to share emotionally and those kinds of things. So like we can experience feeling close to somebody by doing that, but we don't have the fullness of what God would intend in terms of wanting us to have this connection in all these areas. I'll take a breath and let you think and ask a question.
No, that's great. I love that. Really clicked for me when the first time I heard you talk about that, is that, you want them to develop at the same rate. And so often, especially for teenagers and young adults, um, the physical and the sexual pieces, I mean, we talk about it as physical sexuality, but um, the physical relationship develops, it seems, a lot faster, or I shouldn't say develops. It becomes a part of a relationship far faster than it should. And you had talked to something about
Right away.
right away.
Partly, yeah, like partly I think that's because we know how to do that one. like like we figure out how to be sexual with each other, but the others take a lot more work and a lot more time,
Hmm.
and they take different tools. Like we really have to develop ourselves to be vulnerable emotionally with somebody and still have boundaries where we feel safe. Like that takes a lot of time.
Yeah, and I think you had talked about you shouldn't hop in bed with someone who you don't, if you don't know their parents' names or their that, or if they have siblings, or
Yeah.
I mean, there's pieces that you need to know about someone, or you ought to know about someone, before you um, go into a relationship that's just one piece
When,
of the pie.
yeah, when I talk to kids, though, I actually don't even say you shouldn't. I give them an example of when I was working with young girls who were pregnant and they were trying to make a decision about whether to place a baby for adoption or single parent the child. I had to fill out forms as a social worker. I was working at Lutheran Social Service, and they had to fill out all these forms on their background, and I would ask them questions like, what's the father's name? John Smith. What's his parents' name? Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Hmm.
Well, what nationality are they? Well, I don't know. Well, what level of education do his parents have? I don't know. I don't know what they do exactly. And I would say it this way, that it's not good, bad, right, wrong that you made love to this person, but this person isn't here to help you with the most difficult decision in your life. So emotionally, they don't feel that connected to you. and socially you just don't know very much about who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, not that the behavior was wrong, so I'm not getting into good, bad, right, wrong, but I'm saying that wouldn't be what God would want for us in the sense of the fullness of feeling close and connected to someone.
Sure. That's good. Before I have one more question before we open it up, but I just wanted to remind people to go ahead and enter your question into the right-hand side of your screen into that little box, and we can get your voice in on this conversation. So just wanted to remind people about that. I am wondering, as you know, a youth director, I talk specifically with our 9th graders. We have a milestone, sexuality milestone, and so we spend a day talking about sex and sexuality. Aren't I lucky? But I'm wondering, we have a specific part of that day where parents are invited in, and I'm wondering if maybe we could unpack and talk a little bit about what is the role of the church, or specifically me as a church professional. What is the role of me in this conversation, and what really lies in the family? I think it's a delicate dance for me personally about, I have my own opinions, and the church also has opinions or stances, I should say. And so how do we work that dance of the role between the church and and the family?
Well, again, you know how you just said you have opinions. I have opinions about this. And so, it's not like good, bad, right, wrong, but opinions that I've developed over time is that if I want to talk to kids about sex and sexuality, I usually ask if the church that's asking me to come talk will invite the parents to come to the meeting. And I usually address my whole presentation about this to the parents and let the kids listen in. So I talk with parents about the material and about our faith and about the church's role in all this, and we dialogue and talk about where we got our values from and those kinds of things, how we make these choices ourselves. We do all that talking, and then at the end of the time of my presenting, I say to the parents, now that we've talked this all through, you're more prepared to talk to your own kids. And the church, in my mind, is like supporting parents by bringing it up and giving them some tools and helping them to think about it. But then I think of it as a parent job to actually have the talk with the kids in terms of, as parents, here's our experiences and here's our hopes and dreams for you in this area, and the places where we get scared. And if parents can open up in that way, I think it gives the kids a really strong foundation.
Great. All right, got some questions rolling in here. The first one is, why is it important to develop all the areas of intimacy? What do you say? I mean, how do you frame that to a kid?
That would be like the fullest sense of closeness with another person, and in a relationship, whether you develop that or not, I would want you to know what God's vision for us is in terms of connecting with somebody fully as another person.
Great. The next question is, what's the best way to start this conversation with junior high, 7th and 8th graders, or with senior high, 9th through 12th graders, on a youth group evening of 1.5 to 2 hours?
So I usually start by asking kids, where do you get your values? And they oftentimes say parents, church, friends, the media. Those are their usual answers. And I say, well, what values do you get? Like, let's talk about money. Like, from parents, what do parents say about money? And they'll say, save it. What does the church say? And they'll say, give it. What do your friends say? Spend it on me. What does the media say? Spend it. What does school say? Budget wisely or whatever. And then I take sex through the same grid and say, so what do your parents say? And they say nothing, or wait. And school says be careful. Church doesn't say anything, or they say wait. Media says do it, friends say do it. And so then I ask them the question, how do you define in your own life then your values in these areas? Like, do some sources weigh in heavier with you? And kids oftentimes say that their parents and friends weigh in the strongest in terms of helping them define their values. And I say, so when they're in conflict, then what do you do? So we start with just talking about values and how you define them and how you start to hold your own values and shape your behavior based on the values that you hold. And then I move into talking about sharing this intimacy wheel. So that's my beginning when I talk to kids.
Okay, cool. The next question is, do you feel that it's productive to speak to the boys and girls together? And how would you propose to bring this topic forward? So I guess you did address that a little bit. But maybe the first question, do you feel it's productive to talk to boys and girls together?
Yeah, because I'm also, talking to the parents. And like, I just acknowledge that this is uncomfortable for all of us, but partly that's like a piece of the puzzle is to acknowledge that I'm uncomfortable sometimes means I'm not ready. Like, sometimes I tell kids, there's green light, yellow light, and red light. And when you feel really comfortable with something, then it's like a green light, then you go forward. And when you are sure that, like the red light comes, that you need to stop or you don't want to do that. The yellow light has to do with kind of the, when you feel hesitant about something in your life and you're not sure and you don't feel comfortable. It doesn't mean like go right towards it. Like don't think of that as a green light. Think of that as I need some time. And so when you think about sexuality and talking about it and how comfortable you feel, if kids are feeling kind of like I'm uncomfortable, then I say, well, that's a yellow light that you're not ready to proceed forward yet because you're not there yet. But to trust your own gut instinct on that.
Cool. Next question is, what are some good resources to use to discuss this topic with parents and youth? If they don't have the availability to have you come in and talk about it, what are some resources that people might be able to go to?
I think to me the most important resource is parents' own life experience, because they're all sexual beings and they've all had to think this through for themselves, and they have some positive experiences and some that weren't so good. And to use yourself when you're talking to a kid vulnerably as a parent and talk about the things that, where you learned from some of your mistakes and from some of the uncomfortable situations, that means that you and your kids are being really vulnerable, and you're talking about the hard stuff and sharing that it's not so much good, bad, right, wrong when you're experimenting and getting to know somebody and beginning to be sexual in your life, that most of us learn from, in some situations, feeling comfortable and others feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We need to trust how we act.
Great. The next question.
So I guess resources, I think all the resources are in our parents.
Okay. Yeah, and I have found a discussion tool. There's the ELCA put out, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. It's on newsprint. It's orange and black and white. I can post that later, but I did find that has some good questions of discussing this with parents and kids. This next question has a few parts, so hang in there with me. It says, the church says that marriage is the context for sexual intimacy. The church has a ritual for this, which seems to be a tangible marker for when it's okay to have sex. But when the rituals are, but then what are the other rituals for the other wedges in the intimacy wheel, or are they? Could there be? And how?
What are the other what?
What are the other markers or rituals for the other wedges of intimacy? So if we say marriage is the context for sexual intimacy, then what are those other markers for the other pieces of the pie? Are there any, or could there be? And the last piece of the question is, how do kids know that they're, quote, moving at the same pace in all the other wedges if there isn't a specific ritual or marker?
Yeah, I mean the church. This is like okay. We could use a whole another half hour. Um, the church has always taught that the very best possible place for having all of these types of intimacy with somebody to the fullest level is marriage, because there's a commitment, and if a child were to come along, there's protection for the child within that relationship. So the church has always said that marriage is kind of the place. That's the best place. If we're advising people, then we say we would want the fullest thing for you. But obviously, people are sexual outside of marriage, and so, in fact, as a pastor, I very rarely have married anyone who wasn't sexual prior to marriage. So we know that people are sexual prior to marriage. So the church and what's going on in terms of how believers act are kind of in a place where it's not really syncing completely. So it's a hard question to answer. And I know we're almost out of time. So markers for other piece of the pie is like, can you feel like you can open your heart up to this person and it feels safe? Do they respect your boundaries? Do they care about who you are? And for a kid to kind of look at that in terms of, do you feel like this other person is really generous and loving towards you? That would be kind of how I'd describe the other pieces of the pie being full. Mm-hmm. Being as intimate as you can be.
Sure. All right.
I think we need like 2 more hours.
I know it's short, and we can go over a minute or two. But next question is, do you address same-sex relationships with youth?
I do if they ask. They very rarely ask.
And if and when they do, what do you say?
I do the Lutheran theological move of saying, nothing will separate us from God. That Jesus' grace for us is that we're saved, and then invited to love and to be loving towards other people. And so whether I'm heterosexual or homosexual, my orientation, nothing separates me from God.
Great. We have one more question. I think then that'll be it for us. But I wanted to get this in. When a youth's parents are uncomfortable talking about sexuality in general, specifically in a conservative culture, beyond this conversation, what resources can help us guide parents to have the conversation? Are there books you recommend, seminar outlines, or other tools?
There was a book by Jim Nelson way back. It's an older text now, but from the church that kind of talks about intimacy in a really deep and interesting way. What I share with parents is to go to the bookstore, grab a cup of coffee, and sit down with a whole stack of books about sex and sexuality. And then find the book that they feel most comfortable with, the one that kind of answers things in the way that they feel comfortable with, and use that as their guide.
Great. Good. Well, you're right. We could talk about this for another 3 hours, and so don't be surprised if you get an invitation for us in the near future, maybe to talk about this a bit more. Just a few housekeeping things. First of all, we want to say thank you. Always good to chat with you and to pick your brain about this kinds of stuff. So thanks for being with us, Karen.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to, oops, I got a little ahead of myself. Just wanted to put a plug in for the extravaganza in 2012. It's February 9th through the 12th. The intensive care courses are the 8th and 9th, with the main event as the 9th through 12th. It's in the City of the Gathering, which is always a great gift. There's webinars and things like that about how to have a great youth gathering. There'll also be the opportunity to do a gathering bus tour, which is an exciting opportunity, and plus all of the other awesome things that the extravaganza offers. So I want to be sure that you go ahead and register for that. Our next Third Tuesday conversation is with Bishop Mark Hansen, which is really exciting, I think, to be able to have him and to chat with him for a little while. Again, as always, it's 1 p.m. Central, and October 18th is the date for that. So we want to thank you so much for being a part of this Third Tuesday conversation, and we hope to be with you again next month. Have a great day.